In an alarming incident that has sparked widespread outrage, a 22-year-old man named Daniel Williams met a tragic end within the walls of Alabama's Staton Correctional Facility. This unsettling occurrence, highlighting the grave issues within the state's prison system, has resulted in a call for justice and accountability. Daniel, a young father who was nearing the end of his 12-month sentence for second-degree theft, was found unresponsive in his dormitory on October 22nd. Upon being rushed to the hospital, he was declared brain dead, and after being taken off life support, he passed away a few days later. Daniel's fiancée, Amber Williams, said,
"I went to the hospital and the nurses told me that he was assaulted and beaten really badly, and when I went into the room, he had bruises all down his arm, like down to his fingers. He had bruises over here, he had cuts up and down, he had bruises on his legs, and it was bad."
The Williams family, left to deal with the shock and grief of their loss, alleges that Daniel was subjected to brutal physical and sexual assault in the days leading up to his death. Terry Williams, Daniel's father, has hired an attorney to seek justice. Taylor Bostick, Daniel's stepmother and Terry Williams' wife, said a doctor apparently told their family that Daniel was in a coma long before he ever got medical attention. "When we went to see him, he's beaten and bruised up, and you can tell where his hands were bound," said Williams' stepmother. "Somebody's got to pay for it, and I'm not backing down. It's my son," Terry Williams, Daniel Williams' father, told Fox News Digital. "I'll go to my grave with this if I have to. Of course, we're sad, but we're angry. We're angry that they allowed this to happen. He was beaten for almost 2 days," she said. "He was left unresponsive for half of a day before he was found. How?" Insiders from the Staton Correctional Facility, who chose to remain anonymous, corroborate the family's allegations. They state that Daniel was kidnapped, bound, assaulted, and rented out by another inmate for approximately 2 or 3 days before he was found. Despite these serious claims, the prison warden allegedly informed the Williams family that Daniel had died of a drug overdose. According to Alabama Political Reporter, Staton Warden Joseph Headley notified Daniel's father, Terry Williams, on October 25th, that his son was at Jackson Hospital. He told them Daniel had suffered a drug overdose and was brain dead and on life support.
I was like, "Dude, you know this is not an overdose case. You know exactly what happened. How's this crap gonna happen like this?" "Well, it's under investigation right now." And that's the last time I even talked to the warden.
This tragic incident adds to the concerns over Alabama's prison system. Over the past 2 years, at least 12 prison officers working at Staton Correctional Facility and the adjoining Elmore and Draper prisons have been arrested for assaulting inmates. In 2020, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the state of Alabama, accusing it of failing to prevent inmate-on-inmate violence and sexual abuse and not protecting inmates from staff's excessive force. This led to a federal investigation of 13 men's prisons in Alabama, including interviews with around 1,000 inmates. The Williams family's ordeal raises several unanswered questions. They were not informed about Daniel's hospitalization until 3 days after it occurred. Moreover, Terry Williams's request for a rape kit was reportedly denied until his lawyer intervened. His family learned from other men at Staton that their son had been assaulted in a dormitory, tied up, rented out, and likely sexually abused for 2 to 3 days before he was removed from the dorm and given medical treatment. The tragic death of Daniel Williams has triggered a call for justice, not just for him, but for all inmates who have faced or are facing similar treatment. Deaths like that of Mr. Williams are tragic, preventable, and happen all too frequently in Alabama's prisons, said Equal Justice Initiative Director Brian Stevenson. EJI receives reports from medical care providers, family members, and other incarcerated witnesses every month about prisoners whose medical emergencies are dismissed by untrained officers as intoxication or somehow their own fault. In many of these cases, had the person been treated in time, they would have survived. According to EJI, in 2017, 35-year-old Billy Smith was taken from the healthcare unit at Staton to Jackson Hospital for what the prison said was a possible drug overdose. He never regained consciousness, was later found to have a fractured skull, and died of blunt force trauma injuries. An investigation found he had been assaulted by incarcerated people and officers at Elmore Correctional Facility. Officers then hog-tied him face down on a gurney and left him bleeding and vomiting for more than an hour. Joseph Headley was the warden at Elmore at the time. He was interviewed by investigators and never reported any officer involvement, EJI reported. An incarcerated man and a prison guard were later charged with manslaughter in the killing of Billy Smith. Mr. Headley was transferred to the head warden position at Staton. In 2022, Victor Russo was taken to the hospital in Birmingham after he was found unresponsive with apparent blunt force trauma injuries in a cell at William Donaldson Correctional Facility. He died 2 days later. One day before he collapsed, Mr. Russo had written a letter to Donaldson warden Phyllis Morgan, telling her that Lieutenant Mohammed Jenkins had repeatedly struck him in the head while he was handcuffed. Lieutenant Jenkins also reportedly sprayed Mr. Russo in the mouth with mace during the assault. Federal prosecutors charged Lieutenant Jenkins with assaulting Mr. Russo and another man incarcerated at Donaldson. But the Alabama Department of Corrections said foul play is not suspected in Mr. Russo's death, and classified the death in published statistical reports as accidental. 2 months following the tragic loss of her son, Sandy Ray presented a poignant testimony before an Alabama state task force dedicated to criminal justice policies. She held 2 contrasting photographs of her son, Stephen Davis. One showing him as he was known to his family, and the other, a heartbreaking image of him severely beaten and bruised, lying intubated in a hospital bed with swollen shut eyes. "This is my son," Ray declared in December, as she displayed the before and after images of her 35-year-old son, Stephen Davis. According to the Associated Press, Ray recounted having to opt for a closed casket funeral due to the extent of his injuries. "No one, not even a dog, deserves this," she expressed. The Alabama Department of Corrections acknowledged that Davis's death in October was caused by 2 correctional officers at Donaldson Correctional Facility near Birmingham, where he was serving a 20-year sentence for involvement in a 2006 murder. Up to now, Ray has been given minimal information beyond the public statements. Prison officials reported that her son, armed with homemade weapons, attempted to strike an officer. When Davis didn't comply with orders, officers applied physical measures to defuse the threat. Following the confrontation, he was hospitalized and died the next day. Despite her efforts to get answers from officials and calls for a thorough criminal investigation into the correctional officer's conduct, Ray told NBC News that there seemed to be a disregard for the incident. Her concerns, however, have been echoed in a comprehensive 28-page Department of Justice report released recently.
Alarming new report from the Justice Department reveals that inmates in Alabama are subjected to rampant violence and sexual abuse, and prison guards turn a blind eye to it. The report points to a combination of overcrowding and understaffing in facilities, quote, creating an environment rife with violence, extortion, drugs, and weapons. It details horrifying conditions and regular occurrences of murder and rape. Over the course of the investigation, which went on for more than 2 years, the Department of Justice also found, quote, many ADOC staff, that's the Alabama Department of Corrections, appear to accept the high level of violence and sexual abuse in ADOC as a normal course of business.
The Justice Department notified Alabama in 2019 that the conditions in its prisons, created by understaffing, culture, management deficiencies, corruption, policies, training, non-existent investigations, violence, illicit drugs, and sexual abuse, violate the Eighth Amendment rights of incarcerated people by subjecting them to an extreme risk of harm. Since October 2016, when federal prosecutors launched an investigation, at least 98 people have been killed in Alabama's prisons. Hundreds more have died from preventable causes, such as suicides and drug overdoses. Overall mortality has also skyrocketed. ADOC reported more deaths in custody last year than in any previous year in the state's history. Friends of Daniel's family launched a GoFundMe page to help with burial costs. Our name is Elite Drain and Septic. We are creating this GoFundMe to help out our employee, Terry Williams. Tammy and Terry Williams are having to make a decision to take their 22-year-old son off life support on Sunday, 11/05/2023, said the organizer. This is a decision no parent should have to make. This baby was beaten, tortured, and sexually assaulted at Staton Prison by a gang of people with only 14 days until his release. He was pronounced brain dead on arrival to the hospital. We are helping Terry and his family with funeral expenses. They have taken him off life support and will keep him comfortable until he passes. On Thursday, November 9th, Daniel gained his angel wings. They were not prepared for this sudden tragedy. Any donations and prayers will be greatly appreciated. Keep the family in your prayers.